The people of this Puritan town ventured here years ago for freedom. The first structures they made were a cemetery and a jail, as if they were preparing for the sinners they knew were to come. Had the Puritans really obtained freedom? Every person who steps into or out of the jail is greeted by a beautiful rose bush. No matter the person, they all see the same rose bush. Perhaps nature is more forgiving than humans.
The magistrates are much too forgiving.
Even if she hid the letter, her sin would still weigh heavy on her heart.
The woman has sinned greatly. She should be put to death. The woman is good with a needle, but to be flaunting her sin, she is laughing at her punishment.
Who is this woman and what is her crime?
There's Mistress Hester Prynne, a wife waiting for her learned husband. She has been misled, an adulterer.
And who is the father?
Still a puzzle to be solved. Mistress Hester Prynne refuses to speak.
Please, Reverend Arthur Dinsdale, persuade this woman to repent and confess the truth. Do not take all of this punishment, Hester Prynne. Tell us who your fellow sinner is. He may be too cowardly to come forth. Do not let him live with such shame for the rest of his life. I will not speak. My child must seek a heavenly father and never have an earthly one. Okay.
Here's the doctor around to kill your work.
Would you poison my child?
I would never poison an innocent child, especially when she could have been my own.
What about me? Surely you do seek revenge.
Why kill you when living here with your sin sitting heavily in your chest is a better punishment? I see now that I should have spent less time in my study and more with you. How could I ever think a young and passionate woman like you could ever love a deformed and crippled man?
You know I have never loved you. Nothing you could say or do would make me. I am greatly wronged you.
We have wronged each other. Now who is the man who has wronged us both?
I will never say.
Then I will devote myself to this mystery. As you have kept your lover's name a secret, keep mine as well. Your lover's life and reputation are in my hands.
Hester imagined the black man behind him, pulling his lips into a frown and furrowing his brows, while the vengeful glint in his eyes came from deep inside Chillingworth's own soul. It may surprise when it is said that Hester was not confined to this town. She could leave any moment if she wanted to. She was free to return to her birthplace, or anywhere else in Europe, where she could hide under a new identity. Even so, Hester's sin and shame rooted her in that soil. A man lived there who she felt was joined with her in a union that, though unrecognized on earth, would bring them together on their last day. She barely acknowledged the thought before quickly locking it away. Though Hester was lonely, she was never in danger of going hungry. Her profession was, and still is, almost the only art available to women: needlework. The intricately embroidered letter that Hester wore on her breast was an example of her delicate and imaginative skill. Even in this Puritan town, there were occasions where elaborate dressing was desired. Her fine needlework decorated the town in all sorts of pieces, though she was never asked to craft a bride's veil. Hester never sought more than just enough for herself. Her own clothes were bland and made of a coarse material, while she supplied and designed only the most lively and elaborate outfits for her daughter. Hester gave all of her disposable income to charity. She spent a great deal of time making crude garments for the poor, though she could have easily spent it practicing and perfecting her art. It's likely that Hester viewed this dull, unfulfilling of work as a sort of penance, sacrificing hours that could otherwise be spent in enjoyment. Even with her distractions and good doings, Hester was still used as an example everywhere she went. Her trips to the marketplace were daily tortures. One day, Hester Prynne brought a pair of gloves to the mansion of Governor Bellingham. There was another reason for her visit. She had learned that some of the leading townspeople, favoring stricter rules in religion and government, wanted to take Pearl away from her. They reasoned that either Pearl was a demon child standing in the way of Hester's salvation, or Hester wasn't a fit mother to raise Pearl.
Look, Mother, I see you.
In the last few years, the Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale has been suffering because of his sacrificial devotions to his religious duties. The new physician, Roger Chillingworth, has been living with him.
Mistress Prim, there has been a great deal of concern on your skill of raising a good Christian child.
I can teach my daughter what I have learned from this.
Let me ask your daughter a few questions. Pearl, who made you?
I was not made. I was plucked from the rose bush beside the jail door.
She is my happiness. She is my torture. Nonetheless, Pearl keeps me here in life. Pearl pushes me too. See ye not. She is the Scarlet Letter and only capable of being loved. And so, endowed in a millionfold the power of retribution for my sin, ye shall not take her from I will die first. You were my pastor, and now knew of my deeply Christian soul. Pursue them. This girl was meant as a blessing. The one blessing in her mother's life. She was meant as a punishment too. Let us leave them. It was God's will giving this child to Hester.
To pursue his new purpose of revenge, Hester Prynne's husband took up a new name of Roger Chillingworth, and used his common intelligence and learning to live in this Puritan town after being captured by Native Americans for almost 3 years. Due to the failing health of the minister and how he refused to get married, Chillingworth has been living with him as his personal physician. Even so, the minister refused medicine, even with his body slowly shriveling and decaying. The minister believed his sickness and pains were with him because God willed it. After examining and getting to know Dimmesdale, he came to the conclusion of the sickness stemming from his mind and heart. At first, Chillingworth's expression had been calm, meditative, scholar-like. Now there was something ugly and evil in his face, which they had not previously noticed, and which grew still the more obvious to sight, the oftener they looked upon him. After a long time of trying to help the minister, Chillingworth just couldn't seem to find the root of the minister's problem.
Where in the town did you find such strange-looking leaves?
I found them growing on a grave which bore no tombstone, nor other memorial of the dead man, save these ugly weeds that have been taken upon themselves to keep him in remembrance. They grow out of his heart and typify, it may be, some hideous secret that was buried with him, and which he has done better to confess during his lifetime.
Maybe they could not confess.
And why is that?
Perhaps they shrink from displaying themselves black and filthy in the view of men, because thenceforward no good can be achieved by them, no evil of the past be redeemed by better service. So, to their own unutterable torment, they go about among their fellow creatures, looking pure as the new fallen snow, while their hearts are all speckled and spotted with iniquity, of which they cannot rid themselves.
Mother, we must run. The black man may catch you, but he cannot catch little Pearl.
Picture still don't come out.
Who did your hair?
Now close and a good friend of the minister, Chillingworth could exact his revenge in one of the most clever and evil ways. The physician could manipulate him whenever he felt like it. Chillingworth guilts and reminds Dimmesdale every day, a torture much like Hester's letter. Dimmesdale was not oblivious and had a bad feeling of his physician, but saw no evidence for these thoughts and pushed them aside. Even through all of the pain, Dimmesdale suffered in part due to Chillingworth. His intellectual gifts, his moral perceptions, his power of experiencing and communicating emotion were kept in a state of preternatural activity by the prick and anguish of his daily life. Deep inside, the root of the minister's anguish and suffering begins, as soon as he thinks he will admit that I, your pastor, who have baptized your children, who pray on your behalf, whom you revere and trust, am a complete fraud. But the words always get stuck in his throat, and he hated himself for it. Locked away in his closet was a whip that he used on himself as a sick sort of penance. He also fasted, or kept himself awake for nights straight. The sleep deprivations would give him visions of Hester and Pearl, though one night, while he was wide awake, he leapt out of his chair with a sudden realization and quickly left his home. Without any effort of his will or power to restrain himself, he shrieked aloud, an outcry that went pealing through the night.
Ah! How could I have? The whole town will know I'm here now.
He then saw a man who worked with the governor pass by, probably leaving the bedside of the recently passed governor's bedside. The minister thought for a moment that he spoke aloud to the man, but he didn't utter even a word, even if he wished he did.
Hester, Pearl, join me on the scaffold.
Minister, will you hold our hands tomorrow on the light day?
One day I will, Pearl, but not tomorrow.
Many take natural phenomena as omens or messages from God. For the minister, the A represented his own sin of adultery, while the townspeople that saw it interpreted it as A for angel, for their governor.
Who is that man? He frightens me.
I'll tell you, Minister, but you won't hold hands with us tomorrow.
I should take the sick minister home.
No.
I'd like to have a word with you.
Oh, Mistress Bryn, I've heard many whispers about you lately. Some say the council is debating whether or not the Scarlet Letter be removed from your books.
This does not matter. Only God in His holiness could truly remove this letter. This is not why I have come here. I believe I should tell the minister of your true identity.
Chillingworth's face contorts in pure evil at the sentence, though a moment later shock is shown as he realizes just how much he has changed. He thinks back to his studious and uneventful days of newlywed life. He knew Hester did not love him then, but he believed she would in time.
It is I who has transformed you so, but I beg of you to let go of your revenge.
I cannot. You have wronged me. But you're no more sinful than most people. And though I have done the work of a demon, I am not a demon. It is our fate. God blossom as it pleases. You go on your way. You will.
Hester has decided to tell the minister and waits for him in the forest where no one should find them.
Come here, Mother. Mother, the sunshine is afraid of the letter on your bosom. I'll catch it for you, for I wear no leather.
Child, do not wander too far. Stay near the brook and run through the forest.
Okay.
Now, Arthur Dimmesdale! Hester, have you found peace? Have you? No, nothing but despair. God's greatest gifts have become the means by which I am tortured. Hester, I am utterly miserable. What can a ruined soul like mine do to aid in the redemption of other souls? You are lucky, Hester, that you wear the Scarlet Letter openly on your bosom. Mine burns as a secret. I am the only one who knows of your secret. An enemy sleeps under your same roof. Please forgive me. Roger Chillingworth is my husband.
His face burns in rage and anger. His body tenses and his fists clench. But it soon fades when the energy to be angry leaves him.
Don't let Chillingworth.
Hester tells the minister to act normally around Chillingworth,
He's a bad guy.
but that he should leave him for his own good. But Arthur Dimmesdale
Just talk
is a
about
weak
like
man
a
and
homework
does not
assignment or
have the
something.
strength.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
She then suggests he travels back to the
We can
old
go
world,
to a new world.
where he can be
That's
free of
really an
Chillingworth and his guilt.
Hester, I can barely stand on my own. There is no way I can make it to the old world by myself. You will not be alone. If in all these past 7 years I could recall one instance of hope or peace, I would yet endure for the sake of earnest of heaven's mercy. But now, since I am irrevocably doomed, wherefore should I not snatch the solace allowed to the condemned culprit before his execution? Is this joy I feel once again? Yes, because the past is gone and the future is ahead of us, and it is bright. Yes.
There played around her mouth and beamed out of her eyes a radiant and tender smile that seemed gushing from the very heart of womanhood. A crimson flush was glowing on her cheek that had been long so pale. Her sex, her youth, and the whole richness of her beauty came back. If the forest were gloomy, it would seem bright to Hester and Arthur.
Pearl, come here, Pearl. Do you think she'll love me? She will love you, and you will love her.
All right, Michael, to me then.
Why do you halt?
Michael, to me.
She does not recognize you.
Just putting it back on. All right. Will the minister walk hand in hand with us to town?
Not now, but soon.
Will he still keep his hand over his heart?
Shush.
It had been determined between them that the old world, with its crowds and cities, offered them a more eligible shelter and concealment than the wilds of New England or all America. As fate would have it, there was a ship at harbor to help them carry out this plan. The minister believed the arrival of the ship, 4 days from now, lucky. He was to preach at the beginning of the upcoming election in 3 days. This way, he could satisfyingly complete his duties before leaving. At every step, he was incited to do some strange, wild, and wicked thing or other, with the sense that it would be at once involuntarily and intentional. For example, he came across a good man of the church. Now, during a conversation of some 2 or 3 moments between the Reverend and Mr. Dimmesdale, and this excellent and hoary bearded deacon, it was only by the most careful self-control that the former could refrain from uttering certain blasphemous suggestions that rose into his mind. Similar moments kept happening as he made his way home.
Next time you enter the forest, invite me. I can put in a good word for you with my master.
Forest? I only passed through on my way home from my mission.
Right.
I have a new batch of medicine. You should take one before your sermon in a day's time.
The air from my journey has done me good. I need no medicine at the moment.
Hester and Pearl arrived at the marketplace where the election was to be held. As usual, her face was an emotionless stone. Even so, there was an expression on her face too subtle to be noticed than by a psychic. Such a spiritual seer might have conceived that after sustaining the gaze of the multitude through 7 miserable years as a necessity, a penance, and something which it was a stern religion to endure, she now, for one last time more, encountered it freely and voluntarily, in order to convert what had so long been agony into a kind of triumph. A few more hours, and she would be free of it all.
Hester! I must tell you to make room for one more, mistress. Who is this passenger? A physician. He goes by the name Chillingworth. He said he was a good friend of yours, a companion.
Yes, they do know each other quite well.
Hester watched the minister walk past her without a second glance. She didn't know where this feeling came from.
But this minister, would you have known, Hester, that he was the same man who met you on the forest path?
I'm sorry, mistress. I don't know who you speak of.
Do not lie to me. The black man has a way of causing the truth to come to light when he sees one of his own sworn servants acting so shy about the bond they share as the Reverend Mr. Dimmonsdale does. His mark will be revealed to the whole world.
A mark? What is it? Have you seen it? Hester, Pearl.
Stop! Are you really willing to give up everything?
Isn't this better than what we dreamed of in the forest?
Not if you die and take us with you.
The man who sinned with Hester Prynne, he asks you to look at Hester's Scarlet Letter once again. He tells you that, as mysterious and horrible as it is only a shadow of what he wears on his own breast. Even with his own red mark is nothing compared to what is burned deep into his heart. And that man stands before you. Hester, cradle him in your arms. Goodbye, Hester, my little Pearl.
A few years after the death of Arthur Dimmesdale, Roger Chillingworth followed soon after. Now that his purpose in life was gone, he shriveled up and died. In the end, he gave all of his fortune and land to Pearl, who became the wealthiest heiress in the New World. Shortly after Chillingworth's death, Hester and Pearl left for Europe. Many years later, an old woman in gray and a scarlet letter on her chest returned to her cottage where she lived, filling her time with helping the unfortunate and becoming a wise woman to the girls of the village until the day she finally passed. In the end, Hester Prynne was buried next to the Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale.